links based on the links. And then we were like, wow, this is really good. It ranks things like, in the order you'd expect to see them. Stanford would be first. You can take universities and just rank them, and they come out in the order you'd expect. And so we thought, this is really interesting. This thing really works. We should use it for search. And so then I started building a search engine, and Sergey also came on very early, probably in late 95 or early 96, and was really interested in the data mining part. And basically we thought, oh, we should be able to make a better search engine this way, because search engines didn't really understand the notion of, which pages were more important. If you type Stanford, you get sort of random pages that mention Stanford. This obviously wasn't going to work. It obviously wasn't going to scale. Artificial intelligence would be the ultimate version of Google. So if we had the ultimate search engine, it would understand everything on the web. It would understand exactly what you wanted, and it would give you the right thing. And that's obviously artificial intelligence. It would be able to answer any question, basically, because almost everything is on the web, right? And so we're nowhere near doing that now. However, we can get incrementally closer to that, and that's basically what we work on. And that's tremendously interesting from an intellectual standpoint, right? We have all this data. If you printed out our index, it would be 70 miles high now. We have all this computation. We have about 6,000 computers. So we have a lot of resources available. That we have enough disk space to store like 100 copies of the whole web. So you have a really interesting sort of confluence of a lot of different things, right? A lot of computation, a lot of data that didn't used to be available. And from an engineering scientific standpoint, building things to make use of this is a really interesting intellectual exercise. So I expect to be doing that for a while. On the other hand, I do have a lot of other interests as well. I'm really interested in transportation and sustainable energy, and sort of for fun, I invent things on the side, but I don't really have time to follow up on them. I think the age is a real issue. I mean, it's certainly a handicap in the sense of being able to manage people and to hire people and all these kinds of things. Maybe more so than it should be. And certainly, I think, the things that I'm missing are more things that you acquire with time. Like if you manage people for 20 years or something like that, you pick up things. So certainly lack experience there, and that's an issue. But I sort of make up for that, I think, in terms of understanding where things are going to go, having vision about the future, and really understanding, the industry I'm in and what the company does, and also sort of a unique position of starting a company and working on it for 3 years before starting the company, and working on it pretty hard. So, the whatever 24 hours a day, and so I understand a lot of the aspects pretty well. So it's kind of I don't know, I guess that compensates a little bit for lack of skills in other areas.
One is on deploying a service that's going to serve millions of people. When we were at Stanford, we had 10,000 people using our service, or about 10,000 searches per day, I should say. And now we serve over 50 million searches per day. And that scaling of infrastructure, that's pretty challenging. On a more personal level, I think I'm now the president of Google, and we have about 170 people now. And I think managing people and being emotionally sensitive and all the skills you learn in terms of communication and keeping people motivated, I think that's been a challenge, and I've enjoyed learning that, but that's an important and a hard thing to learn.
I think I was really lucky to have an environment when I was growing up. My dad was a professor, happened to be a professor of computer science. And, we had computers sort of lying around the house from a really early age. Like, I think I was the first kid in my elementary school to turn in a word processed document. So And I just enjoyed using the stuff, so it was sort of lying around and got to play with it. And I had an older brother who was interested in it as well. So I think I had kind of a unique environment that most people didn't have because, my dad was willing to spend, all his available income on buying a computer or whatever. Really, it was like 1978 when I was 6. And so I don't think there's many people my age who've had that experience, or anyone in general. And from very early age, also, I realized I wanted to invent things. And so I became really interested in technology, and also then soon after in business, because I figured that inventing things wasn't any good. You really had to get them out into the world and have people use them, right, to have any effect. So probably from when I was 12, I knew I was going to start a company eventually. I just sort of kept having ideas. I mean, we had a lot of magazines lying around our house. It was kind of messy. So you kind of read stuff all the time, and, I'd read like Popular Science or, I don't know, things like that. And I just got interested in stuff, I guess, and technology and how devices work. And my brother taught me how to take things apart, and I took apart everything in the house. And so I just became interested in it for whatever reason. And so I had lots of ideas about, what what things could be built and, how to build them and all these kinds of things. I built like an electric go-kart at a pretty early age. So I read all the computer magazines and things like that, and I was sort of interested in, how these things really work, and anything having to do with, the mechanics behind things, either the mechanics or the electronics, or, I wanted to be able to build things. Actually, in college, I built an inkjet printer out of Legos because I wanted to be able to print really big images. I figured, you could print really big posters really cheaply using inkjet cartridges. So I reverse engineered the cartridge, and I built all the electronics and mechanics to drive it. And it's just sort of, just sort of fun projects. So I like to be able to do those kinds of things.
I certainly like to think I'm young, but these days, by Silicon Valley standards, I'm getting to be over the hill. And if you look at Napster, for example, the founder's like 20. But anyway, I was really interested in computers ever since I got one when I was in elementary school. And eventually I went on to join the PhD program in computer science at Stanford. And it was purely, the interest of what can you do with all of the world's information now that it's online. That interest spawned Google, and that was together with Larry Page, who's my co-founder and partner. I think as a kid, I always had a kind of scientific curiosity. I was always interested in mathematics, and I always enjoyed doing math problems. And in fact, my undergrad, I had a degree in both math and computer science. And I think eventually I was really inspired by computers because of the amazing power that they give you. I mean, today's PCs do 1 billion operations per second. I mean, it's almost inconceivable. And I think that was the most inspiring thing to me, how you could leverage that to actually produce something that was, that was useful beyond video games and things like that. I remember in middle school, a friend of mine, a very good friend who I'm still in touch with, he had like a Macintosh, one of the early ones. And together, he and I would just sit and play around and program. We had little programs for artificial intelligence. We'd have, a little program that would talk back to you. We wrote a program to simulate gravity. I remember we wrote a program to do what's called OCR now, optical character recognition. And it was just for fun and purely out of intellectual curiosity. And I think that's probably the first time that I really experienced that. I remember really enjoying Feynman's books. He had several kind of autobiographical books, and I read them, and it just it seemed like a very great life he led. He was pretty, aside from making really big contributions in his own field, he was pretty broad-minded. I remember he had an excerpt where he was explaining how he really wanted to be a Michelangelo, which is artist and scientist. So I found that pretty inspiring, and I think that leads to having a fulfilling life. Um, and beyond that, just within the computer field, there's certainly kind of a lot of the classical books, which I still find impressive, like Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. That that really 10 years ahead of the time kind of anticipated what's going to happen, and I find that really interesting. As a child, I was, I had an accent. I came to the U.S. at the age of 6, and so I was teased and stuff in elementary school. And I don't regard myself as, being really popular going through school. But that was never that important to me, and I always had friends. I think, if anything, I don't know, I feel like I've gotten a gift by being in the States rather than growing up in Russia. And I know the hard times that my parents went through there, and I'm very thankful uh, that I was brought to the States. And I think it just makes me appreciate my life much more.
I think it definitely helps I mean, just to be really focused on what you're doing. You can only maintain, I mean, you can only work so many hours, and, I try to have some balance in my life and so on. I think, I mean, I think a lot of people go through this in school, they work really hard. You could do that for part of your life, but, you can't do that indefinitely. At some point you want to have a family, you want to have more time to do other things. So it's also, I mean, I'd say that's an advantage too, is being young. You don't have as many other responsibilities as well. I think I'm really lucky being in the Bay Area. There's a lot of people, a lot of my friends have started companies that have been quite successful or at different stages. And so, I'll go up to San Francisco and I'll hang out with my friends and we'll talk about their company or, all sorts of different things. And it's fun, but it's also work in some sense, right? So I think in the Valley, in Silicon Valley, there's a mix, there's really a mix of recreation and work a lot of times. I don't know, it was kind of strange for me. I went back to Michigan and I got to there's all these faculty wanted to meet with me and it was just very strange, going from a student to that. Um, I think Google especially, we're really lucky that everybody uses our product basically, or it's starting to be everybody. And so um, it's just, no matter sort of who you talk to, they're like, oh, he's great. Google today was great. I found exactly what I needed. And, people are just, somehow we've done a really good job. People are really happy with our company. And we provide a pretty good service. And so that sort of transfers onto how people interact with me as well, which is really nice.
I think in terms of being remembered, the uh, I think I want to make the world a better place. I mean, I think that's a pretty generic answer, but in several ways. One is through Google, the company, and in terms of giving people access to information. And, I'm sure I'll do other endeavors too, in terms of technologies and businesses. Um, I think the second is just through philanthropy, and I want to make sure that that while I don't have actually a significant amount of wealth beyond that on paper right now, I hope that I do have the opportunity to direct resources to the right places. And I think that's the most important thing to me. I don't think my personal life, my quality of life is really going to improve that much more with more money.
There's a lot of interesting systems people have designed that basically, are really small monorails that run along sidewalks and they route you exactly where you want to go. And some of these things are actually quite practical. So as a side interest, I've kind of followed this stuff. Actually, when I was in Michigan, I tried to get them to build a monorail between Central and North Campus because it's only a 2 mile trip and they have, like 40 full-size diesel buses that run back and forth. That's 2 miles. And so it's like sort of a prime candidate for transportation.